We don't assume that untethered individualism is the be all and end all. We don't believe that. That's not our belief. So that's not our presupposition. Do you know, the question is this: when you deal with someone, you have to deal with them as per the presuppositions of whatever they believe in is. If you deal with a feminist, you say, okay, you believe in equality, but how comes you're not being equal here? If you deal with a liberal, you say you believe in liberalism, but you're not being liberal here. But if you deal with a Muslim, you say you believe in submission to God, but how comes you're not being Muslim here?
But there is, people define, like within feminism there is sects, within liberalism there is sects. You're never going to find someone, people agree, you know?
What I'm trying to say to you is that you're using liberal, stretchy liberal ideas to measure Islamic theological precepts. And I'm saying, if you can't even prove those to be objective, then there's no use you measuring it with the Islamic thesis, because the Islamic thesis is in no need to be measured by a subjective morality of a white man who's had forced it for 400 years and continues to force it down our throats today. We don't need the white man to force us.
Okay, you know the seerah of the Prophet?
Yes.
There's fabrications in that as well, right?
Yeah.
So how do you...
There's fabrications in the hadith and fabrications in the seerah. Yes.
But not in the Quran?
Not in the Quran.
Something before when you were saying different hadiths can be falsified based on the narrators.
Yes.
How can you tell if those references haven't been
made up
and falsified?
Well,
the line is stay true.
Well, I mean, they have a whole system of doing that, right? And there are conditions for a hadith to be accepted. And so, for example, the narrators have to be thiqah. They have to be trustworthy. They have to have good hifz, dabt.
What I mean is how do you know that someone's just sort of written that narrator's name down on this page and said this was from this person?
Yeah, so there would be some kind of, you'd look at where he lived and who saw him and who met him.
You mean look at who lives? Can you historically track? Historically, I say this historically because even if you have historical information, doesn't mean it's accurate. The Romans, for example, they rewrote their history.
Yeah. So we would cross-reference biographies with biographies. So you have.
It's just paper, or it's been written down, so it's subject to be changed.
Yeah, but then you have the question. Yeah, look, how do you know King Henry VIII lived? How do you know that? You don't know that. No, you do know that. But how do you know that? I mean, if we were to deliver a history class today about King Henry VIII in any British university, is the academic going to come up and say, well, you know, guys, we don't really know that King Henry VIII lived?
Academic. There are, for example, books, academic books that are not necessarily correct.
Yeah, I understand. But how do we know anyone lived? How do you know?
That's the point. You don't.
How do you know the Holocaust happened?
You don't.
Okay.
That could be staged. I'm not saying it did, but you don't actually know. You only know that which you can empirically test, you know. And even
all right. Well, okay. Have the same. If you have that belief, then you don't believe in any science. Most of the things you believe in is based on testimony.
Of course.
All right. So you believe in science because of testimony. You haven't gone to. Well, you believe it. Like if you go to the doctors. All right. If you're ill, you go to the doctors. They give you a prescription, which is based on scientific method. Now, have you carried out those scientific things? Okay, but how do you know? You trust on the person who told you, the doctor who's trusts scientists.
So you trust those biographies?
Yes, we trust it as history, the same way that people would trust.
History is science.
It's history.
It's really a question for information. I wasn't like.
Yeah, of course. So it's the same thing. It's just like testimony. We believe is an effective way of knowing something. You know what I'm saying? So
obviously, I'm coming here to ask you your testimony. So
yeah. Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. But is there any other questions? Do you get what I'm saying here? What I think you guys have to do. Of course.
I never used to know this. Obviously, I met some sisters, and they say that the niqab is actually fard.
Yes.
I haven't. No matter how much information I read, I will never be able to attain everything to fully conclude. Do you know what I mean? My lifespan won't allow that, I believe. So, what is
the position on that?
What's your opinion?
I don't know. My position, I don't know. Yeah.
What
So
about hijab?
okay. So I would say you have two main opinions within the Islamic discourse. One that is fard, and one that is mustahab. Some say that it doesn't exist in Islam. They are lies. Mustahab is like sunnah. It's not fard.
Sunnah is not fard.
no. Okay, the word sunnah could mean something which is fard sometimes, and could mean something which is masnoona,
Like your choice.
manduba, yeah, mustahabba, which are basically things which preferred. Yes,
Okay.
you get it. So some say that. The majority, I would say, probably don't say that it's fard. The vast majority don't say that it's fard. But it doesn't mean just because the majority
Is it
says
fard in
something.
some school of thought?
Yes. No. Like the school of thought, the Hanbali school of thought. They see a lot of scholars. They do say that it's
Can
fard.
I ask you one personal question?
Go on.
Because my sister's looking into Salafism and it's
Yeah,
cute, like cool, you know, but do you align yourself with any sect within Islam? Or do you follow
Well,
particular school of thought?
look.
Or do you just say innocently, I'm just a Muslim?
No, I don't. Well, it's not as easy as that. I think people that watch my videos know that I definitely associate with Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, right?
Yeah, but which,
In Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, I've got more of a learning, like I was taught the Hanbali way, yeah, the Hanbali school of thought. But so I am more in that way. Like I'm more. If I don't know anything, I'll just look at what the madhab says from that perspective. To be honest with you. So the Hanbali school of thought, most of my fiqh information comes from that.
so which site would you recommend to get honest information? Because there's a lot of anti-Islamic sites.
What websites?
Yeah.
Do you know?
Oh my god, I have
Yeah.
one more question.
Yeah.
Sorry. What is up with the fatwas? Why do people need to make a fatwa? Like, we know something is illegal. Like, why do you need to make a fatwa to stop people from smoking cigarettes? Do you know what I mean? Like, is a fatwa... What is a fatwa? Did it exist at the time of the Prophet?
Yeah, fatwa. In the Quran, يستفتونك عن النساء. In the Quran, they ask you for a fatwa on women. Oh, assalamu alaikum. You're right. You're good, yeah. Yeah. There's lots of fatwas, but the point is this: a fatwa is when you're trying to, because there's two things. There's ta'sil al-hukm and tanzil al-hukm. Ta'sil is when we know what a hukm is, a ruling is, because it's mentioned in the Quran. As we said before, however, how that actually comes, how it actually actualizes, right, materializes in the domain, is where the fatwa comes in. So someone to make a fatwa has to be a mufti, or let's say a mujtahid, or someone who's able to do that. So that's why they look at the situation and say, okay, well, let's look at the Islamic corpus and see what's most appropriate for that particular situation.
I got all my questions. Thank you so much for your
Is that it?
Yeah.
Jazakumullah khair. So what I would advise, we live in a world today, yeah, wallahi, let me tell you something. I just want to really hammer this point home. We live in a post-World War II new world today, right? Where because the Allies had won the war, they were able to build infrastructures and spread their ideologies in a way that was not possible before, okay? It was possible in the colonial period, but it wasn't possible in the interwar period. After 94, you could say 1994, the situation became even more intense because the Cold War ended and the only ideological military power, which was the Soviet Union, had collapsed. We live in that context, which means we live in a dangerous world where you think you live where there is a monopoly of ideas, but you actually have the amplification of the Western post-colonial narrative and the suppression of the rest of the ideas. In that world, it's hard to take yourself out, it's hard to pull yourself out of the white man's shoes. We will continually...
And the same argument would be made about an ignorant believer.
Yeah.
Because I've
Yes.
seen some muftis
Yes.
say a woman shouldn't
Yes.
sleep next to a wall because
Yes.
the wall is masculine.
No, that's ridiculous. Maybe...
Do you see
yes.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Fatwa to kill Mickey Mouse.
Yes, yes, the same argument could be made with religion. Yes. If someone is not critical, whether they be living in a post-colonial environment or whether they be a religious believer, and they don't want to ask questions which strike at the heart of their own faith, okay, and at the heart of their own existence, then they will invariably be overtaken by the currents of the new world. And I believe that this is a serious situation which could overtake us in the form of this wave of globalization, right? Or this wave of American hegemony. I say this. I say that before asking, because the majority, I've been doing this now, da'wah, for a while. I've noticed that the majority of questions that are put about Islam relate to someone putting themselves in this 21st century white man's bubble, anachronistically looking back at the Prophet's life and trying to superimpose their own value judgments on this, and also at the same time falsely assuming that everything they believe is true and everything we believe is false. You can't start with that premise. Just because we live in your country, it doesn't mean we're going to believe everything you're going to believe.
I agree.
And I'm not saying you guys are,
I
but
agree.
that's the message I want to put to them.
Could be made about a Muslim country that someone left Islam.
Of course,
Yeah?
You've got to
no doubt about it.
got to
Yes,
start
but
from
the
like
point
changing
is this.
perspective.
Yeah. So I say this. If whoever it is believes in liberalism, then the heart of liberalism is critical inquiry. If you think about it, right? So we have to inquire critically. Is liberalism itself, is democracy itself, is secularism, are these things worthy of being used as pseudo ultimate truths that we now have to measure everything towards? Or are these things, as we've discussed and shown, practically, when actually operational, not able to actualize themselves in a full sense? And if that is the case, then to what extent are they effective? And if they're not effective completely, then we know that they're not perfect. And if we know they're not perfect, then how can we measure what claims to be perfection with that which we know for sure is imperfection? So next time we ask a
Are
question,
you saying in order for something to be true, it has to be effective?
sometimes, yes. I mean, it's,
The Quran says don't drink. There's Muslims who drink.
yes, no. What I mean is that the ruling of not drinking is effective to one's spiritual and physical. Do you get it? All right. So the point is this.
Do you ever get doubts? Like
No, alhamdulillah.
did
Now,
you ever used to it?
maybe when I was younger, critically and stuff, you always doubt. But when there came a time where literally I believe that Allah gave me a very strong sense of yaqeen, very strong
How do you
sense,
keep yourself not?
which means certainty.
How do you keep like? I don't even know how to word that. Yeah.
How do I ground myself? Yeah,
No,
Steino,
how do you know that what you're thinking is true or not? Like
because it makes sense to every.
like that you've been
Yeah,
affected?
well,
in the way that to truly take on another perspective, to challenge it.
yeah, I get that. Do you know, because Islam has a way of proving itself, right? It has a falsification test. It has an inimitability test. It has evidences that aim to prove its reality. Its core message, which is the message of Tawheed, of believing in one God and worshipping one God, is a message which I believe not only appeals to my logical state of being, but also appeals to my existential spiritualism. And I believe that from all of those perspectives, Islam is no doubt the most effective, the most plausible, and the most rational recourse for me. Do you get what I'm saying? So I've come to that conclusion.
But do you think to truly examine other perspectives, you have to see things from their point of view?
Well, I have, and that's why I've studied this.
I'm not
Yeah.
saying you don't.
So I've looked
I'm
at these
saying
things.
To do that, would you, in fact, have to step aside from your own perspective? And
Not
take
really.
You
on
can never
theirs?
do that, I believe.
Do
You
do
can never
feel-
like actually step out. And
Yeah, you don't. Like, some
like,
people
I had
assume.
my teacher tell me,
yes.
you just have to put all the ideologies on the table
Right.
and analyze those ideologies. But what ideology are you using to analyze those ideologies?
Exactly.
So like it's impossible.
do you
You
think
are
you
that
can-
which you
No,
can
that's
shape.
that's a good point.
So do you truly think then you can see something from someone else's perspective?
Yeah, no, I can't. I cannot employ a completely
I know you say that's
empathetic approach.
subjective, but
Yeah, I
obviously
can't. I can't employ a completely empathetic approach. But what we can do in a free market of ideas is compare things on the value or the merit of rationalism. So say, okay, the idea of atheism, for example, how does it compare to theism? The fact that something, theism, that God's existence. So what makes more sense? That there's something that created the universe or something that doesn't. For example, that the universe is sustained without a sustainer.
It's not what makes sense. It's what's more probable.
Yeah, what's more probable? What is more rational? What's a better recourse? So for me,
If you're
the
an
more
atheist, you won't understand religion. If you were born and you were brought up an atheist, I think it's very hard.
yeah, you're right. Sometimes it can be. That's why atheists have to be
Because it
honest.
just seems so alien to you, like the prophet flew. Like it seems like fairy tale stories, doesn't
Yeah.
it? Like Santa Claus.
Well, I mean, do you know what else is a fairy tale story? If you think about it.
Yeah.
Today's technology is yesterday's magic. Let me tell you something. This is what people think of today.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, it's real ironic. A lot of people are saying that, you know, look at these stories of yesterday, a man flying into the heaven, and this has happening, and this or that, and look at these, and a man splitting the sea, and all these things. Look at this magic. Look at this illusionary tale. Look at this fairy tale. The ironic part of it is this. Retrospectively, we know that we have things today that had we been able to go on a time machine and go back to yesterday with, people would think is magic. Because how the hell would you explain to a medieval peasant the functionality of an iPhone?
Well, coming back to this
That's
book,
magic for him. If he sees an iPhone, he'll think, what the hell is this?
but
Right?
makes a point about the book.
Do you get what I'm saying?
We were talking about where they said everything's in this book.
But the point is this I'm making is that this is an argument from ignorance. This is an argument from ignorance, because just because I cannot conceive of the reality of something, it doesn't mean that thing doesn't exist. Now, if I go back to the medieval period with my phone and I show the peasant, this is an iPhone, okay? I can speak to him for a long time. Now think about this. I go back to the medieval time period and I say this as a machine, there's a piece of metal that we put onto our ears, and that actually it has movies on it. You can see human beings on it. You can talk to someone across the world with it. You know, it's got a camera on it. You can take pictures and videos. You can capture this. You're speaking to a peasant. Or you tell them that this machine that you go on and you're gliding around and these things. Yes? What are they going to think of that? They're going to think, okay, what are you talking about? I can't even imagine what you're talking about. But how do we know that exists? Because we've experienced it. For us, it's experiential, right? Now, in the same way as that we haven't experienced their past and they haven't experienced our present, it doesn't mean that either of those things don't exist. So if someone says, I don't believe in religion because look at those stories of the ancient, as it says in the Quran, Asatirul Awwaleen, that they say that this is the ancient tales. In fact, and you were talking about apostasy, there was one person called, he's a poet called Abu Ala al-Ma'arri, who was an Abbasid poet, who didn't believe in God, who was an apostate from Islam. But they left him to do poetry, by the way. They left him, he was doing poetry, and one of his famous lines was Al-Hayatu kullaha ta'ab, that the whole of life is being tired. Anyways, if you ask those individuals about our technological reality today, they will say, what the hell is this, right? They'll say, what is it, what are you talking about? I can't even imagine what you're talking about.
It's kind of like that thing you were saying with the hadith in the book, and it had everyone's names in it.
Yeah,
Today's nothing.
right, exactly. So we look at certain things in the Quranic discourse, in the Hadith discourse, and we can't even imagine how could a man split water. Who cares if we can't imagine it? Who cares if they can't imagine it? Does that mean it doesn't exist? You see what I mean? And by the way, for the record, there was a Hadith of the Prophet. He said that there's going to come a time where people will glide around in machines and this and that, and it's going to have interiors made of leather and these things.
About the music in
One
here as
more
well.
question.
Yeah.
Can the hadith be carbon dated? Can you go
Yes.
back and see?
And they are carbon dated. For example,
How do you know?
well, they have been carbon dated. Like for example, the Quran has been carbon dated.
I know that, but I'm saying about hadith.
That some of the manuscripts have been carbon dated. Some of them are written, right? So that some of them have been carbon dated. Same thing as the Quran has been, the Sana'a manuscript has been carbon dated 632 or 652. So that's been carbon dated.
I think I forgot her name. One of the women there, she shouts a lot. I was watching.
Yeah.
Brown hair, she wears glasses.
Yes.
She mentioned in one of the videos that they don't put the date of the carbon dated. Is that true? Like,
Well, I don't know. I haven't seen all of the hadith. I know that there are lots of hadith that have been written, right? And that we have not only a chain backwards to them, but some of them have been carbon dated. But I don't know how many of them have been carbon dated. And that's I have to go and do my research on
you
that.
should.
Okay, Jazakumullah khairan. I've got so many microphones on me.
Thank
But
you
yeah,
so much.
anytime. Okay, Assalamu alaikum guys. Jazak-